There was a time long before video games were what they are today. A time where you had to beg your mom to take you to your local Blockbuster so you could pick up the SNES version of Doom.
But Mom, it's not as bad as it looks. I swear I'm doing God's work, killing the demons.
From those simpler times, a beautiful, wonderful art would emerge, launching a movement that would last decades. I'm of course talking about the long dead, lost art of Machinima. So Machinima is a shorthand term for machine cinema. The machine being a video game and cinema, of course, being a movie. I think we all get the picture. To be clear, a movie that is based off of a video game is not Machinima.
I don't care what they say about you. I love you so much.
Machinima is the manipulation of video game technology, whether it be a game itself or a video game engine, to create a movie. Now that we're all hopefully crystal Pepsi clear on that, let's dust off our Walkman cassette players and put on our biggest pair of jean shorts, because we're taking a little trip to 1996. Princess Diana's divorce is making headlines. The top grossing movie of the year is Independence Day, and Ray the brick fucking Wall Lewis gets picked 26 overall in the NFL draft by the Baltimore Ravens. On June 22nd of 1996, the video game mega hit Quake would get released. 4 months later, on October 22nd, a group of Quakers called the Rangers would use Quake to make the first machinima in history, titled The Diary of a Camper. It used in-game video capture to tell a story about a group of soldiers that would fall victim to a foe that everyone who's ever played Call of Duty will recognize: a camper. Cleverly enough, the players/actors in the film would use the chat box to display dialogue, which is fucking genius. This would be the first notable kickoff of Machinima. It was more of a proof of concept, but hardly what made it popular. A few years later, a movie called The Seal of Nera. The Seal of Nera would be made, again using Quake. It was by far the biggest, most ambitious video game movie to ever be made, and I'd tell you every single little detail about it if it wasn't boring as all It ran just 5 minutes short of 4 goddamn hours. I really tried to sit through that slog, but my fucking Gen Z TikTok Mountain Dew monster brain has just been too damaged by all the 5G radio waves to sit through something so painfully slow. For the next few years, there'd be many more of what was known as Quake movies back then. 7 years after The Diary of a Camper, 3 years after The Seal of... Who gives a fuck? A little production company named Rooster Teeth would create the first real Machinima, the f***ing Star Wars of Machinima, Red vs. Blue. Moving away from Quake to add a bit of fresh air to the genre, Rooster Teeth would start making fully scripted and voice-acted episodes of a show set in Halo Combat Evolved. This show would parody first-person shooters, military life, office culture, and it also acted as a sort of commentary for the ethics of war and its morality.
I understand why I have to go this time. It was actually Doyle who made me realize something I'd never thought of before. There's so many stories where some brave hero decides to give their life to save the day. And because of their sacrifice, the good guys win, the survivors all cheer, and everybody lives happily ever after. But the hero never gets to see that ending. They'll never know if their sacrifice actually made a difference. They'll never know if the day was really saved. In the end, they just have to have faith. Ain't that a bitch?
As funny and entertaining as Red vs. Blue could be, there are a lot of moments that you could really relate with the characters, empathize with them, and find deeper meaning. I grew up with Red vs. Blue. I was there when Blood Gulch was the only scenery that the show was set in before they added all this hardcore, high-budget CGI choreographed fight scenes. Before Rooster Teeth was able to bankroll all that fancy shit, it was a pure machinima. It set the benchmark for what a machine cinema should be. From 2003 to 2006, Red vs. Blue was popular enough, but machinima as a whole wouldn't really step into the limelight of the mainstream until the release of a little South Park episode called Make Love, Not Warcraft. 2 years after World of Warcraft's release, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the creators of South Park, would approach Blizzard Entertainment asking them if they could feature their hit MMO in one of their episodes, which Blizzard would not only agree to, but would help in the production of, to Matt and Trey's surprise, which I can hardly comprehend as being surprising.
Oh, so you're telling me that the creators of one of the biggest adult animations in history wants to use our game in one of their episodes?
South Park, make love, not Warcraft.
Yeah, I think we're gonna do that.
Upon airing, the episode drew in 3.4 million viewers. It ranked number 2 on IMDb's list for top South Park episodes, and it won an Emmy.
South Park, make love, not Warcraft.
Thanks to Rooster Teeth and Red vs. Blue, machinima became a rising niche, but with one episode from South Park, that niche became a whole genre that had YouTube hooked for years. In the years following, games like Neverwinter Nights, Team Fortress 2, Portal, Minecraft, Grand Theft Auto, and of course World of Warcraft would be used to make machinima. For 19 years we had machinima, and I'm not talking about the genre anymore, I'm talking about the machinima. I think it's time we start having a little conversation about machinima.com. So in the late 90s, Quake was the king of machine cinema. Called Quake Movies back then, Quake was really the only game being utilized to make machinima, the most notable being The Diary of a Camper and The Seal of Fuck It, which we already talked about. But in 2000, when Hugh Hancock launched Machinima.com, it became the hub for its namesake. A place where people could come together and talk about their favorite productions or new creators and download their content. What you have to understand about Machinima.com and a handful of other websites is that they were the only ones shining a light on this novel genre of entertainment. This was a time well before YouTube. You couldn't just search for videos to find the content you were looking for. Back then, if you had an interest in anything, you had to hope that there was a website producing that particular content. Obviously, the site had small beginnings, but over the next 19 years, it would grow and grow and grow. A little less than 1 year after YouTube opened its doors to the whole worldwide interweb, Machinima created its channel and set the stage for its next chapter in a YouTube dynasty. It was sometime in 2006 when Machinima.com started its YouTube channel. It started out pretty small, releasing machine cinema movies and movie trailers, some video game walkthroughs, and my childhood favorite at the time, Arby and the Chief. But it wasn't very long until they started expanding and started covering things like game developer interviews, upcoming video game trailers, and video game news. Over the years, they really started to lean into the news thing, especially after rolling out their editorial brand, Inside Gaming. I don't want to get too deep into Inside Gaming, just know it was a pretty big deal, alright? I could go on and on about how Machinima, the YouTube giant, grew so big that it ended up toppling on itself, becoming so absorbed in greed that the owners would start doing the most shadiest, underhanded business practices so they could keep their content churning monster fed and that green river flowing. But I'm not gonna do that because that's not what this video is about. In all that time, in the almost 2 decades that Machinima started out, it made its rise and eventually ended up in the spotlight. What happened to it? Where is it? Where has it been all these years? Hell, the website and the eventual YouTube channel that was solely dedicated to Machinima moved on from it years before they'd closed their doors and shut down. Why is that? Well, the answer is pretty simple. No one cares anymore. Red vs. Blue is probably the face of Machinima right now, the last herald of its dying genre. And most of you probably just thought to yourselves, holy shit, is Rooster Teeth still making Red vs. Blue? Yeah, they are. On July 7th, just 19 days ago, as of me recording this, Rooster Teeth announced that they're making their 19th and final season. And you know what? No one gave a shit. It made no headlines, no TikToks, no YouTube shorts, nothing. And that's because no one wants to consume this form of media anymore. Back in the late 90s and 2000s, there was a real divide between video games and cinema. These were mutually exclusive experiences. Video game technology was really limited in what it could do as far as immersion and providing rich and compelling narratives. Fun gameplay was the focus. Most video games didn't have voice acting, motion capture, or super interesting storylines, or anything that would make you consider it cinematic. That's not to say that back then there wasn't some stellar games that had some of these things, but you weren't experiencing them in the same way that you were movies. Machinima changed that. It gave you cinematic experiences that you'd expect in a movie theater, but it's different now. Video games have the resources to scratch that itch nowadays. Look at Uncharted 4, God of War, Spider-Man, anything PlayStation. Game studios are using actual TV and movie actors for their games now. They're employing whole orchestras, hiring professional writers. There are games that stand on their stories and cinematics alone, regardless of uninteresting gameplay. We don't need video game enthusiasts to create video game movies anymore because developers are already doing it on their own.